Somebody had emailed me out of the blue, basically like, hey, I have $2 million locked on a Trezor One hardware wallet. Can you hack this device and get it out? If you get scammed with cryptocurrency, you're basically never seeing the funds again. Anybody that says something is unhackable is either lying or they truly believe that it's unhackable. And in that case, then you should go hack it to prove otherwise. I was a mischievous kid and caused a lot of trouble and discovered computers. I related to a computer a lot more than I actually related to people. That was the first time that hackers met on friendly terms with the government. I mean, that was an amazing experience, but it was like a bunch of scruffy hackers meeting with lawmakers in the country. We were pissing off people on both sides.
If you invest in cryptocurrencies or crypto tokens, I think the number one worry that you have is where do you store your tokens or keys? And people will give you all sorts of advices like, store them in hardware wallets, store them on your mobile phones where they're safe and whatnot. So today we're going to be talking about hacking hardware wallets and trying to bust some myths around the security of wallets. Welcome to the Jhacker Show, where we talk tech and vulnerabilities and practical implications of those issues and cutting the corporate jargons and noise. And today I have with me someone really special. So he's testified in front of US Senate, found vulnerabilities in a lot of hardware devices, including parking meters. He's created some of the coolest hardware hacking tools like JTAGulator. He's hosted some of the coolest tech shows and is also part of some movies as well. And finally does a lot of hardware hacking. So welcome, Joe. Welcome on the Jhacker
Thank you.
Show. I'm really proud and honored to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
One of the things that not many folks know about is Joe is also an advisor to Exploity. He helps us on the tech and security side, as well as on the business side of Exploity. Anyways, so Joe, let's start with the main theme, and I'm pretty excited to have you. We're going to discuss a lot of things, but
Cool.
We'll start with the hardware wallet hacking. So tell me, how did you get into hardware wallet hacking?
Yeah, it's funny, like it's sort of it's kind of hard to explain. Like, I've always been a hacker, right? So that's sort of like the baseline. The cryptocurrency kind of fell into my lap, where somebody had emailed me out of the blue, basically like, hey, I have $2 million locked on a Trezor One hardware wallet. Can you hack this device and get it out? So to me, it was less about like, I'm into cryptocurrency and more about I can use my skills to help somebody. And it just happens to be in the world of cryptocurrency in this case. So it's funny because a lot of people, because of my videos that we've done, a couple over the past few years that are cryptocurrency focused, and I think a lot of people know Joe Grand as cryptocurrency person, and that's like a subset, right? It's still using the same hardware hacking skills and the same hacking skills. It just happens to be against cryptocurrency wallets right now versus other things. But yeah, totally just a random encounter that ended up turning into a really interesting kind of field, where I get to kind of learn new skills as I'm hacking on different wallets and helping different people and hear a lot of interesting stories, and also end up helping people in a way that I never thought I would, as far as like helping them get their money back that they, were locked out of on a device.
All right. And so over time, what has your success ratio been, both in terms of being able to get inside the hardware, like from the tech perspective, and being able to actually extract the keys, and the
Yeah.
person has some crypto in the wallet?
Yeah. So when we filmed our first video about hacking the Trezor wallet, where, I'd been making a lot of my own videos before then on YouTube and really focused just for like a hacker engineering audience. And didn't really care about production value or anything like that. I just wanted to get the information out there. And my wife was like, "You should be filming this hacking that you're doing." Because I was doing it in my lab here, alone, trying to figure out how to hack this device for this guy that was locked out. And it was something that it was, just it was her idea of like, you need to show people that you're still a hacker. So I ended up hooking up with some friends of mine that are filmmakers, and we made this big film that ended up going viral. So it was like a 17-minute, story of hardware hacking and fault injection against the Trezor One, and all these really interesting things. And at the end of the video, I was like, if you have any problems and you're locked out of your cryptocurrency, like, let me know. I'm always interested to hear other stories. We didn't know by making that video that that was going to open up this can of worms of the amount of emails that we get. Like, I assumed falsely that people that were into cryptocurrency were more from a technical background that had, heard about it back in the day. And that would have been true in 2009, 2010, maybe up to 2013, 14, until it spread to a way that more like non-technical people, more mainstream people could start using. As far as like, you didn't have to go to some shady like Bitcoin ATM, you didn't have to mine your own. There was exchanges, you could, go and put in cash and get cryptocurrency out. So the world of cryptocurrency was way bigger than I thought it was. And by sort of planting that seed in that video of like, reach out if you have a problem, we got so many emails that I couldn't even respond to all of them. It was like, I don't even know. Like, the video I think now is almost at 10 million views, and we have a couple other videos we've made of other hardware hacking that are also sort of like 4 million, and one is like just went over a million. I had no idea how interested people would be in this stuff and how many people were actually needing trouble. I don't have good percentages, but I will say most of the emails we get are people who they're one of two, or sort of the most. One are people who have been scammed. So they sign up for some what appears to be a legitimate, investment platform, or somebody sends them a direct message or an email that's like, I'm an investor, you should send money to me and I'll invest it in cryptocurrency. And they said, basically the scammers make fake wallets and it looks like these people are making lots of money. And then they're like, oh, well, if you want to get your money out, you got to pay $3,000 in transaction fees. All of this stuff that as technical people, we would be like, that's totally not right. But for somebody who maybe doesn't know, they kind of fall for it and they trust this figure who appears to be technically more competent than they are. So a lot of emails are about people getting scammed, and that's something that we just can't help with. There are a couple companies that say, yeah, we can trace back, blockchain transactions and things to maybe find out where the scammers are or how many other people they've scammed, looking at different transactions. But that doesn't really, I feel like that doesn't help in most cases, and it gives people like this false sense of security or false sense of maybe hope of like, if you get scammed with cryptocurrency, you're basically never seeing the funds again, unless it happened to be part of some large investigation that, some organization is working on taking down, a group. So a lot of scams, a lot of people that say, I remember buying cryptocurrency, or I remember doing some mining and I have my old hard drive, or I have this, or I don't have anything. I have my public address. Like, can you get my crypto back? And it's like, well, it's not really how cryptocurrency works. You can't get the private key from the public key. You can derive the public key from the private key, but not go the other way. So most of the emails are sort of like, we can't really help. And then we do get some emails that are hardware focused, but most of them are actually software based. So somebody set up a wallet online, or they have, a Bitcoin Core wallet, something that needs password cracking, or other sort of reverse engineering. That's the majority of the work. And I do a little bit of that, but now I've sort of built up a team of people that can help me do the software stuff, which then lets me focus on the hardware stuff, which is a smaller amount. But there's still some really interesting projects that for me is it helping people is great, but really for me is like that technical challenge of learning something new, because it's always good to learn something new. And like, a lot of stuff I'll look at with hardware and it's like, okay, I've done that a million times. I've broken that. I've seen this over like, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. I've been around for a long time. It's like finding something new is fun. So that for me is what keeps me interested in the hardware side. Um, and we'll take on projects that we think are have a good chance of success. And with some of the work I've been refining since that first wallet hacking video, and like 3 years have gone by, and I'm almost ready to release a whole new kind of set of work that I did with a colleague of mine to kind of refine some of the attacks on the Trezor Model One and on the Trezor Model T, kind of taking what I learned early on, combined with what other people have learned, kind of in between, and then getting it to something that I'm happy with and that my colleague is happy with. So it's like hacking. There's always something to learn, and of the people that email, like we can help some, and if we can't, we at least try to explain why we can't or why it's not possible.
And so what are the different platforms or hardware that you've been able to extract keys from?
Yeah, so the main ones actually, there are a lot of different hardware wallets out there. And for me, because I only have a limited amount of time. And if I'm here, I'm kind of hacking on stuff, but a lot of times I'm traveling, I'm giving talks, I'm going to conferences,
Yeah.
I'm teaching about hardware hacking. So I have to really pick and choose like what stuff I work on when I'm here. Um, so we do get emails about, there's probably like a dozen hardware wallets that are commonly used. Uh, but funny enough, the ones that we get the most emails about are the Trezor Model 1 and the Trezor Model T, these older devices. Like, technology is always increasing. And Trezor, as a company, they have the Safe 3 and the Safe 5 that are a completely new design. They use a secure element that's designed, to more securely store secrets. Uh, which I don't know if that's been sort of attacked or vetted by an outside firm, but that's something that they've created their own secure element. Ledger has their Nano S, their Nano X, their S Plus. Also, those use secure elements. I feel like over time, people will start using the newer wallets and then eventually they'll get locked out of those newer wallets. But what I've seen is like a lot of people are using these old devices because that's where they put their cryptocurrency on however many years ago when they bought it or when they mined it, and then they forgot about it for a long time, and then they forgot their password. So the sort of the benefit of doing this work is a lot of times we're working with older technology. We're in like the regular world of like, oh, every Tuesday or Monday, whatever, we get new software patches and things get fixed. Hardware isn't like that. The life cycle is way longer. So we can benefit by looking at those older devices. So yeah, the Model 1, the Model T, I've done some, and that's the majority of it. I've done some repair work also, so things that don't necessarily need full hacking, but like a screen is damaged or the buttons are damaged or the circuit board is damaged, where I'm kind of doing swapping of things. So just more electronics kind of technician type of work, which is also cool because you don't have to hacking. It doesn't have to be like this state of the art every single time I'm breaking the top of the line thing. It's like if somebody needs help and they don't know how to do X and I have the skills to do X, maybe some people wouldn't call that hacking, but we're still doing something that other people can't do and we're solving a problem just in hardware. So yeah, it's definitely interesting, but the only ones really that I've looked at up until now are the Trezor devices. And the main reason for that is because of the limited amount of time I have. It's sort of like, okay, if one person comes to me with one device, does that warrant, a year of research or 6 months of research to figure something out? Um, Maybe at some point, if I have a lot of free time, I'll start dabbling in other ones. And there's a couple others like BC Vault is a common one that a couple people have had problems with. So maybe that's like the next thing I'll look at of is that worth hacking? Um, but I'm not the type of person that will, like a new device comes out and I immediately buy it and try to hack it. Like I just don't do it. I'm more of like a practical or more of like an opportunist, right? So like if there's a purpose for it, that's my motivating factor these days of like I want to do it not because I can necessarily, but because there's an end goal of like I can help somebody. Uh, and to me, that is like, and possibly make some money at the same time and learn something new. Um, but there has to be something there. And so who knows what's going to be the next thing.
So besides hardware, do you also get requests for looking at phones or laptops?
Yes, a lot of phones. So we actually get a lot of requests not only for people that have cryptocurrency on their phone and they broke their phone or they are locked out of their phone or laptop. We get a lot of like these typical kind of forensic recovery data analysis types of questions of like, my laptop broke, I can't get my family photos off, or unfortunately, this is probably the most common type of other non-cryptocurrency email I get of like there was a death in the family, a drug overdose or something. Our family member left their hardware wallets, or they left their phones, or they left their laptops. Can you help get into them? Um, Sometimes we can help if we have some clues, if it's cryptocurrency related, of what that person may have done. There's a story I talk about in my most recent video where somebody had mentioned to a family member of like the password is related to grandma's name, and they just mentioned that, but they didn't give a lot of details, but just that little clue. And then they ended up passing away. So that was the only thing we had to work on of like, okay, grandma's something to do with grandma's name. And we ended up crafting massive word lists of different combinations of things using grandma's name and nickname and partial names, and eventually cracked it, which was cool because the family got, a little bit of sort of closure about it. But yeah, a lot of times we'll get just standard like we want pictures from this phone so we understand the last thing my son did before he died, which is a totally different business model. Um, that's more of a typical kind of consulting. There are data recovery companies that will do things like that. That requires usually, you're charging by the hour or by the job or something like that. And I'm not really comfortable with that scenario. Like I was a consultant for a long time and would charge hourly work and do projects and design reviews and penetration tests on hardware and all of these things. But with the cryptocurrency business, anytime somebody's asking for money up front, generally means that they're scamming you, which goes exactly back to what I talked about with the scammers, that they're going to be like, "Hey, send me money and I'll invest it in, my platform." And then they just take off with the money. Uh, so with the wallet hacking, we don't take anything to do the work, and then we'll take like some percentage of the funds that we recover, which is a horrible business model. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. Uh, but it is something of like, I feel like that's the only practical way to do it in kind of in an ethical way, of we're in it all, are all in it together. We put in the work. If we succeed, we all succeed. If we fail, we all fail. The silver lining for me is like, even if I fail, I'm still learning something that maybe I can prevent next time. Or I still learn some technique that I can use for something else, cryptocurrency related or not, right? Just hacking related in general. Um, so that's kind of where we live as far as like taking percentages of things. But the other types where people are looking for digital forensic work, once in a while I'll help if it's something either simple or a personal referral. But usually I'm passing it off to a friend of mine that actually does like data recovery and phone extraction and memory extraction and things like that's his full-time job. So I just refer stuff to him so we can kind of focus on our thing. But there are so many problems with hardware out there, like of all types. And it's really fascinating to see that. I had really no idea. Like my world was the hacking world. Uh, and even like, doing prototype this as this TV show to show engineering, like I didn't know how many people were watching the show. I was just making the content. And with the videos, I'm just making the content. And when I go to a conference, those are all hackers and engineers. So I never saw how big that bubble was of people using technology that actually need help. And I mean, obviously, everybody has a phone, everybody has technology, but I just never put that together of like, wow, there are a lot of people with a lot of problems. So,
All right. So let's start with the Trezor One or Trezor T. Can you walk us through your findings or steps, if you will, like
yes.
going from zero to hero?
So some
What
of
are
them,
the things
yes.
that you did?
Some of them that I'm working on now, we're not quite ready to release, uh, but we will end up releasing the entire sort of process flow. But sort of from the basic level is this is like inside of a Trezor One. And the Trezor One and the Trezor Model T, which I don't have one here, both use general purpose microcontrollers. So these are, this one's an STM32F205.
Oh, wow.
And then
Okay.
the Model T uses the STM32F427. So different types of general purpose microcontrollers, little computers. Um, neither of those have any like very what we would call now like secure elements or any sort of real security features. What the security is of these devices is called code protection. And that basically is a feature that the engineer can use to lock the chip and prevent somebody from getting access to the memory. So it's not like we see with secure chips these days that are much more advanced. It's more of a stopgap of like keeping honest people out kind of thing. Um, the Trezor devices they're storing their recovery seed, so the private key and the pin inside of the general purpose microcontroller. So the main goal for these devices is to basically defeat the code protection so we can get access to the contents of the memory to extract it. Um, every microcontroller that's out there, general purpose microcontroller, will have some sort of code protection feature, and every family of chip is different. Even within the STM32 family, which is ST Microelectronics,
Yeah, yeah.
every
There's,
single chip has
there's
a
so
different
many
type.
chips. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of a challenge of like whatever your target is that you're working on, like let's figure out how we can defeat the security of that. When I first started doing this work, some friends of mine had already proven that the STM32s were vulnerable to something called voltage fault injection, where you're basically providing power to the chip and then very quickly using some specialized tools short the power supply line or the reset line or something on the chip to kind of cause a brownout, which will not reset the chip all the way, but kind of mess up some internal logic of whatever's happening with the microcontroller. So maybe it skips over an instruction or it returns corrupted data from whatever was asking for something or retrieving something. Uh, and it's a very kind of unpredictable technique where you eventually find the parameters that cause a fault that's beneficial to you, and that might be the the voltage level you're driving to, the time you're holding the power line down, when you hold the power line down, like all these different parameters you have to figure out. But if you do it at just the right time during this boot cycle of this chip, you can downgrade the security from like being totally locked out to not being as locked out. And then from there, there's a couple other techniques you can do with other fault injection. And depending on the firmware of the Trezor, you can get access to the contents, which sometimes are stored in RAM. Other times, later versions of Trezor devices, all the contents are encrypted and stored in flash memory, which requires a secondary attack to do. Um, that's the stuff that we're refining, but it becomes very, very precise and very, very repeatable once you kind of narrow down the parameters that you need. But really, the gist is using fault injection to intentionally cause the device to fail in some way that we can take advantage of.
Got it. And how did you hook onto the microcontroller, like on the JTAG lines,
Yeah,
to
so
be
so
able to
this
communicate?
So this one is just, I don't have the rest of the circuitry with me, but this is like the main board and Trezor devices are open source also, which is kind of a benefit, both from a like a user perspective. So if you're curious about how the design works, you can look at it. But from a hardware hacking perspective, it's like, oh, we can just pull up the schematic for the system. We can pull up the circuit board layout for the system. Even though like most devices are simple enough that even without being open source, it doesn't take a lot of effort to put together a schematic, an electronic roadmap of how the system goes together. It just it just saves us a little bit of time. So it kind of gives us a stepping stone to work with. So these pins along the side are the JTAG and SWD connection, so the debug interface connection, and then one of the pins that's not part of that is soldered on down. Let's see, what can I use? Use a little knife to poke at it. Um, what's on here? Some tape is on the knife. Okay, so this bottom pin is not part of the debug interface. That's connected to a capacitor that is now no longer there, that feeds into the internal voltage regulator of the chip. And that's what we're using to monitor the power consumption, but then also inject our own pulse, our own fault through that. Um, but this is sort of and by doing that, you're causing the fault, and then if you do it at just the right time, then you communicate over JTAG or over SWD, depending on which way you want to go, and query the device and say, "Are you open yet? Are you open yet?" And you do the glitch. Are you open yet? Do the glitch. Are you open yet? And eventually, if you do that enough at the right time, then it will sort of just open up and give you access. That's the simplified version. Voltage fault injection is it's not as, I guess, elegant is I guess would be the right word, compared to like other types of fault injection that we're now using and that other people are using, called electromagnetic fault injection, which gives you a much more precise location of where you want to inject your fault. It doesn't require the same types of physical modifications to the board. Um, but there are a lot of other parameters you have to deal with. But it really is, this is what our first video was about, of discovering, because I'd never even done it. So sort of discovering about fault injection, learning about fault injection, and then defeating the security of this older version of Trezor device. Um, the later work, which I don't think I can really show much from here, but I have
Yeah.
kind of this CNC platform, so I can move the probe, move things around from here. I have some other hardware over here. I have a device here which is called the chip shouter. So this is an electromagnetic fault injection tool. Down on the board, I have the chip whisperer, which is for fault injection. Usually it's for voltage fault injection plus side channel monitoring, so monitoring power consumption and acting on things that way also. And I sort of have this platform so I can move my probe around over the chip, figure out where that chip is the most susceptible to injecting faults, and then blast it there, bypass security, and then do multiple things at that point. So it really it can get really deep really fast. Um, and I've spent, yeah, I mean, multiple years now, like learning this new technique and refining this process and kind of creating a framework that I'll be able to use for other things also in the future, and that other people will also be able to use for other things in the future. Uh, and it's just been this fascinating like rabbit hole of kind of exploration of things, and in a very scientific way. Like a lot of times with hackers, we're like, oh, we think outside the box and try these new things, and we don't have to conform to the standards of whatever. And that's true, right? Like we do want to think about different techniques that the engineers haven't thought about, and different things. But in order to properly do this stuff, you really have to follow a scientific method of like, what's going to happen if I do this? Then you test it, then you look at the result, then you refine it, and then you do it again and again. Which is really funny because I remember being in school. I'm like, I'm never going to use the scientific method for anything. And once you get really deep into things, you need to, and you have your lab notebook and you're taking notes and you're taking pictures and documenting as you go so you don't forget things, is hugely important. So yeah, this work will hopefully come out soon, and then the entire code base and the setup of what we've done with the hardware, and that's going to be for electromagnetic fault injection with the Trezor Model 1, the Trezor Model T, but in a much more refined manner, based, compared to what I've done in the past and compared to sort of what other people have done. So sort of building on, our work and the community's work to kind of keep pushing things forward. I'm super excited about it once it's ready. Yeah, can't wait.
So these models, the newer ones, are using STM and a secure element.
Yes.
Okay.
So I know the Ledger devices, they use a general purpose microcontroller for some functionality, and then the secure element for other functionality, the amount of general purpose functionality is being reduced in the general purpose chip, and then that stuff is being moved into the secure element. So things like with the Ledger Nano S, the microcontroller used to control the button presses and what to display on the screen. But then that could be susceptible to things like supply chain attacks, where if somebody gets access to a device, they could maybe modify the code of the general purpose chip. Even if that chip has security, they could maybe just write their own code to display something on the screen to maybe look like it's sending to, a cryptocurrency transaction somewhere where it's sending it somewhere else or whatever it is. Um, so Ledger has moved some of that functionality into the secure element, and the secure elements are designed specifically for security applications. It doesn't mean that they're secure. It just means that they have taken way better steps than general purpose microcontrollers.
All
And
right,
these
all
have been
right.
used in
Yeah,
smart
hold on there.
cards.
You
Oh,
said secure elements are not generally secure. Like just because they're
yeah.
secure element doesn't mean that they're secure. Can you
Yeah.
elaborate on this part?
Yeah, I mean, nothing's 100% secure, right? I mean, most secure elements are significantly more secure than anything else. Uh, it might just mean you need much more expensive equipment to break the system. It means they've built in mitigations for fault injection or for timing attacks or for other things that we might try to do on a device. But I think you should always have in your head of like, okay, they've done a better job with security, but that doesn't mean it's impenetrable. Anybody that says something is unhackable is either lying or they truly believe that it's unhackable, and in that case, then you should go hack it to prove otherwise. It just might mean it's significantly difficult currently. Just like fault injection 10 years ago, like was a very niche thing where a handful of people did it for very specific types of attacks on smart cards and gaming consoles. Um, but now, because of the chip whisper and all these other tools and accessibility uh, and documentation and resources, like anybody can now do fault injection, at least to learn with certain platforms. So what used to be, code protection used to be generally good against most type of attackers, but now it's not good against many attackers. And with secure elements, it's the same thing. Or any new secure feature, you're only secure for as long as nobody can find a vulnerability in things. And as you know, like with hardware development, things are constantly changing. And as being an engineer as well, so I've designed products also, and not really security focused or that had any need for security, but I understand like getting your system to work is priority number one. Getting your system to work under budget is priority number two. Um, Security is really hard to design well, and you might think that you've designed good security in, but then you're inheriting all potential security problems from the chips that you're using. So, say if I'm using an STM32 F205 in a product, it was secure until somebody discovered it was vulnerable to fault injection, and now my product is at risk at no fault of my own. So secure elements definitely make things a lot harder. But even with secure elements, like there might be an implementation issue of like the hardware itself is good, but maybe the way that the human engineer designed to interface with that system or interact with that system, like maybe there was a problem there that could be exploited. And we've seen that with some hardware wallets too. There was one called One Key that was a smaller hardware wallet, maybe used in Asia more, but that had a secure element. But it turns out that I think it was like at one point in time during the boot process or at some point, the secure element was not locked, so you could get access to the secure element before it locked down and actually became secure. So yeah, so I'll say like it's more secure, but may never totally be secure. But a lot of times also with security, it's like and it's harder with hardware than software, but your goal really is to make the attack hard enough or time consuming enough that whatever value you get out of it is less than the amount of time and money you'd put into it, which is also like answering your question about cryptocurrency wallets, the exact same thing. Even if there are devices that claim to have increased security, you still have a human designing these systems. So you always have this risk of implementation problems along with everything else. And you also have like different certifications that people can start to follow to make their designs more secure, sort of checklists of what to do and what not to do. But a human still has to implement those things. So that's like we will still want to look for vulnerabilities or mistakes in how an engineer is designing something in. But yeah, I mean, products that are using secure elements, those chips are designed specifically for security. So they have a lot of mitigations against the types of attacks that we would do. But they may not be susceptible or they may not be impervious to all types of attacks. Just at some point, the cost might not be there, or the value might not be there. And that actually is like the one kind of mantra of security is like as long as your security is good enough that the time or effort required to get access to the data basically isn't worth it for the attacker, that ends up being good security. So in the case of say like we'll just use cryptocurrency because we were talking about that. If somebody comes to me with some brand new type of wallet that I've never looked at before, and it might take 6 months of research and $100,000 of equipment or whatever it is, specialized tooling to do, but he has $1,000 of cryptocurrency on it, it's probably not going to be worth my time to investigate. So the
Yeah.
security by default is better because it's protecting a value that's not worth getting after. If it's something where I'm more interested, not from a financial perspective, but from a curiosity perspective, where the money doesn't matter, then it's more likely that something will be broken faster. Uh, but generally, security comes down, especially if you think about it from like what hackers are going after, which is money, personal information, things that they can sell. If your security is good enough that it's hard enough for them to do that they don't get a value out of it, that's good enough security.
Got it. Got it. So in the new one, in the new ledger, are you looking at uh, only the secure element right now, or the STM as well, or
Right. Oh, right. And then yeah, so those are the ledger devices that have their general purpose microcontroller and the secure element. For the Trezor Safe 3 and Safe 5, I haven't looked at those. I do actually have the schematics, but I haven't looked in detail, so I don't remember if it has a separate general purpose microcontroller or not. Generally, though, most devices do. Like the secure element in most cases is sort of like a peripheral chip that you still need something to communicate to it. That's just the vault that is usually securely storing things. Um, you do have some devices that are like secure microcontrollers, they'd be called, where you do have secure elements inside of the microcontroller as well, but those end up being more expensive. So then you have this cost benefit trade-off, and companies don't like to spend money on things that they can't quantifiably show. Like, is this going to make me more secure? Is this going to sell more products? Whatever it is. So a lot of people are not using these more expensive secure chips, which, just like I mentioned, though, even if we think it's more secure right now, somebody might put it into their device and then somebody else hacks it. And now they've paid extra money for a device that is just as insecure as something else. So there's all these business reasons why people aren't using the latest and greatest technologies. Yeah,
right? So, so what I understand now is that the you should not definitely go for the older versions of hardware wallets, because you don't know whether they'll have secure element or not.
yeah.
And even on the newer versions which have, let's say, secure elements, it's just a matter of time in terms of when somebody finds a vulnerability. It's kind of like software as well, right? It's
It's
just a
exactly,
matter
yeah.
of time.
Yeah, it's exactly. And with hardware, the only thing is hardware moves much slower and people don't, even me, like I know I have to update my OS and I have to update some tools, but I'm hesitant to do that because I don't want to break things that I'm currently working on. And that's in software from a security person that knows I should be updating things. With hardware, it's a slower progression of like different devices. And that's why we still see people with old devices storing cryptocurrency or whatever it is. Um, So probably the like I don't like making recommendations about like what product to use or any particular vendor names or anything like that. But if somebody is really serious about security, probably the best thing to do is sort of upgrade every once in a while as the products start introducing more security features. Because the STM32, the microcontroller on the Trezor devices, ST Microelectronics knows about the vulnerabilities that are used against these devices, and there's billions of STM32 microcontrollers in the world for all sorts of other things,
Yeah.
and they haven't patched the problem because they want people to use their more expensive, more secure chips. Um, but if you're able to, maybe every couple of years, it's like, okay, I'm going to move my funds from this older version to a newer version, just assuming that maybe some vulnerabilities have been patched along the way. The problem with that, though, and the reason that we get so many emails is people end up forgetting their recovery seed. So if they can't get access to the device, they can't transfer their funds. Um, or yeah, they might want to upgrade to a new one and they can't. If you're keeping track of your things properly and you remember your PIN, you remember your passwords, and your recovery seeds are securely stored, then you can make this sort of iterative change every once in a while of like, okay, let's move from this one to this one, not because it's unhackable, but because it's more secure than the other stuff at this given point in time. Then a couple years later, maybe do it again and say, okay, let's move to something a little more secure. Kind of like with phones and with laptops, there's a lot of, fluff and other technology that we may not need that comes along with it. But, secure boot process and secure like, EFI stuff is like trusted platform module. Even though there are problems sometimes with those, it's way better than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So if you have the luxury of being able to buy a new hardware wallet every once in a while and move your funds across those, that's the best way. Is it the most practical? No. Like, are people going to do it? Probably only the hardest, core cryptocurrency people will do that. Most people are going to put it on a device, throw it in the closet, in the shoebox or whatever, and then forget about it, and then forget their PIN and can't get access to it, and then they're locked out. So from my perspective, it's like if you're going to do that, then don't upgrade to a newer version. Stay on the older stuff because then the likelihood of something being vulnerable is higher. Uh, so a lot of times it's good because people are like, oh, if I hadn't have been locked out of this device, I would have sold my cryptocurrency when it was $10,000 a Bitcoin, and now it's $90,000 a Bitcoin. So losing it is sort of a side bonus for them. Um, but it is something like if you really it comes down to physical security, I think, altogether. Like it doesn't matter what type of hardware wallet you're using, or even if you're just writing your recovery seed on a piece of paper, if you're storing it in a secure way, in a safe deposit box, in a safe, whatever it is, because the likelihood of an attack is fairly low anyway, unless somebody comes after you and they rob you and they take your device. But even then, if you have your recovery seed, you can move your funds somewhere else before the attacker ends up attacking the device and moving it. So there's a trade-off of like, do you want to be really secure where at this point in time somebody might not be able to hack the device and help you if you get locked out, or do you want to be less secure from a hardware perspective, but having the option of somebody hacking it if you need to, then the risk being if you get robbed, someone might get to it. So it really like there's no one answer for everybody. It really depends on how you're using cryptocurrency, how you're storing it. Are you hodling? Are you just buying it and not touching it for years? Are you constantly making trades where you do need a hardware wallet with access that you can, approve your transactions and things? There's just a whole variety, but generally, like based on the people that I've seen, the people that are forgetting their pins and their passwords are not the technical people that would be doing these upgrades every couple of years to stay secure. It's people that are interested in the technology or have no idea what the technology is. They just happen to get involved in cryptocurrency. Where in that case, it's better if they just stay on the platforms that they are, not mess with anything. And then at least if they do at some point get locked out, somebody might be able to help.
I think it makes sense, because if you have a lot of cryptocurrency on your hardware, and I think all you need to do to change is to have the passcodes, right? And then you can,
Yes.
easily move to any device of your
Anything. Yeah,
choice.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, and I mean, I think diversification is important too. So multiple wallets with different funds, maybe even different wallet vendors. Um, don't keep all your eggs in one basket because if you do end up falling scam to something, maybe you do have your recovery seed, but there's malware in your computer that when you go to like set up some new hardware wallet, the malware is, key logging you and sucking your recovery seed out and stealing all the funds before you get stuff set up. Because I mean, there's like, I think the chances of hardware being hacked from a security risk perspective of like somebody getting their funds stolen is so ridiculously low that unless you're like a celebrity or somebody that people know has a lot of cryptocurrency and carries their token around with them and everything, like it's really low. Most people are getting scammed by phishing, scamming, emails, malware, software-based kind of security things, where hardware is a cool, convenient thing of like, I have my crypto stored in a wallet and hardware wallet, but that's not really the way that people are going to get robbed. It is just the way that people like me would be able to hack something to help get the funds back. And also for people who are thinking of robbing me, I don't own any cryptocurrency. Um, I own zero. As soon as I help free the coins, take my cut, sell it, done. Um, I don't have the stomach for the actual like volatility of cryptocurrency, but it's not like I don't carry a crypto wallet around. I don't have them in my office. Like, yeah, don't bother.
All right. So what I get from you is that hardware has problems. Like if somebody sits down and has motivation to hack it, they will probably find some way or the other. If not now, maybe in another month or a year.
Yeah. Yep.
But you shouldn't be worried too much about the hardware because the probability of somebody attacking the hardware is low rather than high chances of you being hacked through the software, be it your mobile
Exactly.
application or web application or desktop
Yeah,
application.
tons. There's so tons of problems there. Exactly. Yeah. So it's an interesting world of all these different hardware wallets and hardware technologies. But yeah, that is definitely the low end of how people are getting hacked.
Got it. Got it. So let's move on to you now. Tell me how did you get into hardware security or security in general? What was your motivation? Was it accidental or
Yeah, I mean, total accidental. Like be like security, cybersecurity, like that wasn't even a concept until I was already probably like in my 20s. Um, I was a mischievous kid and caused a lot of trouble and discovered computers. And to me, the computer was just this fascinating world of like I related to a computer a lot more than I actually related to people. It was something that I had control of. I could write programs and it would do what I wanted it to do. I could play games and I could trade games with other people. I could type games in from listings, program listings in magazines. And then I could modify the games and they would do other things. Like it was a really just interesting world where it's not like now where we have our phone and the phone does everything for us. When I got involved in computers, and this was 1982, which was very early in the home computer world, I had an Atari 400. They only did what you told them to do. They were just kind of waiting there for you to do something with it, to interact with it. And I just loved everything about it. I discovered bulletin board systems, so I could call using my modem. I could call other computer systems and talk to other people. And that first started as trading games. Then, as I got into my teenage years, it was less about games and more about like, hey, I have this cool password for this system that I found by war dialing and looking at every phone number, possible phone number within a certain set of numbers. So trading passwords, trading just other interesting information, basically having knowledge that other people didn't have was nice. Like I didn't do sports. I wasn't stylish. I wasn't cool, but I knew that I had power that other people didn't have, and I had skills that other people didn't have. Um, and then if that eventually turned into sort of credit card fraud and like as being a really dumb teenager, stealing credit cards. And at the time, it wasn't like now where you have these cybercrime groups and ransomware and all these things. Like it was a very different time where it really literally was almost all teenage kids exploring. Like, of course, you had people that were making money on it, and they were probably, older people doing it, but not in any sort of organized fashion, really like now. And the hacking community at the time it was, I feel like a lot of it was curiosity based and somewhat ego based of like, I have something you don't, I'm Kingpin from the loft, like very like, this is me and these are my skills. But I just loved being able to kind of control things that I shouldn't be controlling and doing things that I shouldn't be doing, which is what I was doing outside of the computer, but now I could do it in the computer as well. Um, at the same time, I was also starting to build electronics. So reading electronics magazines, building electronics. So as I'm learning about computers, I'm learning about electronics and learning about how the computers work. And then I start designing my own kind of electronics because my whole goal, I knew I was going to be an engineer. You couldn't just be a hacker, right? Like I loved doing the stuff and it seemed totally normal to me. Everything I was doing was normal. There wasn't ever a goal of like, I'm going to be a hacker, I'm going to be this. It was just like, I'm going to screw around and explore and have fun. And this is what I like doing. But I'll be an engineer when it comes time to growing up. I'll be an electrical engineer and I'll design products, which is the path that I went. I ended up getting arrested in high school with a bunch of other guys that I had met up with in Michigan, just some random state in the country where I'm not anywhere near that. But a bunch of us on winter break in high school all decided to meet up, and we were all part of a hacker group called Renegade Legion, and thought it'd be fun to like hang out and play video games and just do whatever. And then we got this bright idea to go break into a Michigan Bell telephone company to get equipment and information, sort of this forbidden knowledge that other hackers didn't have. Like we wanted that. And having our sort of undeveloped teenager brains, we broke into the parking lot of this facility and broke into the vans and got all the equipment and everything. And it was very fun. It was very like very movie like of like, we had our crowbar and our thing, we're clipping through the fence and going in and it was really kind of fun, but we ended up getting in a lot of trouble for it, which was not as much fun. But that was really the turning point for me of like, okay, now I'm 16 years old. Um, Still, security is not a career. Like there are people that do security, but it's not like it is today. Um, and it was just like that was a wake up moment for me though of like, okay, I should maybe stop doing like this illegal stuff and maybe start using my skills for good. Around that same time, I ended up joining with a local hacker group in Boston, where I'm from, called The Loft. And at the time, that was just like a bunch of guys hanging out, playing with computers. Uh, they were all older than me by at least 6 years. And after I got in trouble, they're like, "Hey, why don't you come join the Loft?" So they really took me in under their wing and became my mentors, where I could kind of learn from them and kind of mirror their behavior of like, okay, when I see Count Zero go up on stage to give a talk, or even not on stage, like when we go to a little hacker meetup together, I'm this young kid, he's slightly older. I can see how he is sharing his knowledge with other people and how he's learning from other people and how he's showing other people stuff that he's learned and just the way that he would carry himself and Brian Oblivion and Space Rogue and all these other people that were around me. I got to see how you could be a hacker but use it in a positive way. And that was really like that's when the light bulb went off. But even during the loft, we all had jobs at that. By the time I was in the loft, I was still in high school, went through college, still in the loft. After college, got a professional engineering job, designing electronics and medical devices and consumer electronics, which is where I learned a lot about the product development side, which was awesome. And I probably would still be there if it wasn't for all of us at the loft deciding this was late 1999 of like, hey, we should try to do security full time. Like, let's do a security consulting company. That was just starting to be a thing. Like some of the Legion of Doom hackers from the 80s had started a company called ComSec, and they were doing security consulting work, but they were way ahead of their time. Uh, they were offering a service that people didn't know they needed yet, and people were still afraid of that hacker term. But they proved that it could be done. When we did it with the Loft, we're like, what if we did this full time? Like maybe we could like actually start a company. And some of the guys at the Loft were doing dabbling in some consulting work around security. And that's when the Loft sort of went from this kind of anarchist, fun hacker clubhouse to more structure as far as like, can we make enough money to pay rent? Ooh, we can. Can we make a little more money to pay next month's rent? And then we showed ourselves like, okay, so you could actually make money doing computer security. So in 2000, we started a computer security consulting company, one of the first, called At Stake, and it was pretty cool. Like we had uh, a bunch of like old computer executives running the company, which I thought was really cool until it turned out that you don't want just random people that they had tech experience, but they didn't have that hacker mindset or the security mindset. And which made things really hard from a sort of head-to-head kind of perspective. But we had like super talented people working there, not just I don't even know if they would consider themselves hackers, but very, very talented security, I guess what we now call like a security professional or a security researcher. But it was just such an early day when we first tried to start this company. We're like, oh yeah, we just want to like do research and find vulnerabilities and share those with people and like that we can help customers. And people are like, why? You expect us to give you money to just do research and find security problems? We're like, yeah, like that would be awesome. They're like, well, no, you have to bill hourly to help other people like design their network securely and their hardware securely and all these things. Um, so doing what we loved to do, which was this vulnerability discovery and hacking on things, because that wasn't making money, it wasn't a drive directly making money. It wasn't a driving factor for the company. So it became more about, penetration testing, um, less research, more just the same types of things over and over again for different companies. Uh, but it proved that point again a step further from the LOD guys of like, okay, now this can be a real thing. And then other security companies started popping up, and now it's like you can be a security researcher, you can be a hacker full time, you can get bug bounties, you can get paid for it, and you can help people design securely. So it's just been interesting to kind of see that progression. But for me, it was never about making money. It was always about this technical curiosity and the fact that if I could do that all the time, like that would be awesome. Now that I'm older and I have more responsibilities, it's a little bit of like, okay, where am I going to spend my time to make sure that I can still support my family, but still not compromising my own belief system of like what I want to do and what keeps me interested. But yeah, I mean, definitely an interesting journey, and it really is only now it's been 20 something years, but probably within the course of like 5 or 10 years, this industry really exploded. And now we see, obviously it's a multi-billion dollar global thing where you go to hacker conferences sometimes and like, you go to Black Hat and you go to the sales, the expo hall, like it's almost like it's a different world. Like, where are the hackers? There's people like us walking around that clearly don't look like we're selling something, um, or buying something, but then there's everybody else. Everybody else is in the suits, and it's very business oriented, which ultimately is good for everybody, right? Like that's why I'm able to do hardware hacking trainings. But it's a totally different mindset. Um, but it's just such a necessary thing. Like you almost need that because every company is potentially a vulnerable unless you had a security team in place and security products and all these things. But I mean, it's sort of, I guess, like watching a band that started in their parents' garage that now is playing arenas, where it's this natural progression and it's just wild to kind of go along on that ride.
Yeah, I think for anything to be successful, the easiest measure is money, right? So,
Yeah, I mean,
be it hacking, be it crypto, until and unless the big guys put their funds in, it's more or less like a community or
yeah, I mean, I think the thing is like once people see that there is money to be made, you get a lot of people coming in that don't necessarily care about the technical challenges and care about security and care about the community. They're there to make money and sell product, or they're the criminal groups that are doing ransomware and exploiting all of these things in a way like, somebody in the security community might find some really cool vulnerability and write some exploit code to get the problem fixed. Then somebody else takes that and abuses it in some way that they can make money on. Um, so it's just a much different kind of landscape of like all these other people are involved. Where I feel like when I first started, it was everybody was just passionate about this stuff and curious and like, yeah, as teenagers we were causing trouble and like ripping people off, but it was really the banks. Like the banks were just like, if it was credit card fraud, like the credit card owner would get his money back from the bank, and these faceless corporations were just paying for it. Um, but it was very benign, I would say, compared to now. And I think it was necessary because a lot of those people that grew up were, as I did, went on to go found a lot of these like very important security companies now, and work at a lot of places that need to have security. So if you really dig deep, like a lot of hackers are embedded now in all of these different companies that maybe you don't really know because now they're like one person, and if they're not very vocal or they're not the salesperson or whatever, like you might not know. Um, but hackers are still there. They're just surrounded by a lot more, other types of people.
yeah, yeah. And so how did you choose the name Kingpin?
So that was that was just the one that stuck. Um, I always like it better when like somebody gives you a name of like we deem you whatever. Uh, I had a couple of those that were sort of joke handles, but I first started as Black Ninja when I was 7 years old and used that for a while, and then changed through a bunch of different names as I was kind of finding myself, I guess. Um, and I ended up choosing Kingpin. That was the one that I used, I think, starting in 1991. And it was kind of a combination of things. There was a band in Boston called Kingpin. I liked that band. It's part of the skateboard, and I was into skateboarding. Uh, it was also very kind of tangentially like I wasn't into comics, but the Kingpin character in Spider-Man uh, was this like super badass, diamond, whatever jewelry, like, criminal. So I kind of felt like that was me, but not, I wasn't obviously, but like, I just thought he was really cool. Um, and it just stuck. Like that was the one that it got established enough that now I couldn't change it. And people still to this day, like that I know from back then, still call me Kingpin, KP. It's pretty cool. And I still like to use it. A lot of times I'll say, Joe Grand, aka Kingpin, or Joe Grand,
Yeah.
parentheses Kingpin, just to let people know because so much now in the hacker world and the security world, people are just using their real names because a lot of it is just for recognition, or you're giving a talk so your company, name is out there so then you could do consulting work. So I like to still have my name to kind of just remind people that there was this past of hackers where we had to use fake names so we didn't get arrested, so we didn't get caught. We were pissing people off. We didn't want them to find out where we were. So it was a necessity more than anything else. And then over time, my name got leaked by a friend of mine who will go unnamed, got leaked to the press. And I'm kind of glad he did it because it was probably about that time. But I probably also would have been totally fine remaining anonymous and just having my hacker name out there. Uh, but I like still including it, even though I don't say like you call me Kingpin. Like I don't do that. But if somebody calls me that, I'm totally fine with it. And I like that people that I keep it out there on purpose so people see like, okay, why does he have a nickname? Oh, because he used to need one back then. Like when we testified in front of the Senate, um, that was the first time that hackers met on friendly terms with the government.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we were
What was
invited.
that about? Yeah.
I mean, that was an amazing experience, but it was like a bunch of scruffy hackers meeting with lawmakers in the country. We were pissing off people on both sides. The hackers who are like, why could you ever talk to the government? And then the straight people or regular computer people were like, oh, these guys are talking about all these things that will never happen. So we were using our fake names. We all used our actual hacker names in the public record of American history because on one hand, we wanted to show that hackers were different, and that we had a reason to hide, and that we valued our privacy. Um, but on the other hand, because we didn't want people to find us, and like send us death threats and stuff. It was a very controversial thing. And that came about through a couple different things. But ultimately, we received this formal letter of like, hey, we would love for you to come, uh, provide testimony to the Committee on Governmental Affairs, which is now, I think, like the Homeland Security something or other. We want you as hackers. We're familiar with your work because we had been finding vulnerabilities in Microsoft Windows, and I'd been doing hardware hacking stuff. And Brian Oblivion had a bulletin board system that we were selling CDs of like text files and all sorts of things. Um, they wanted us as hackers, like, tell us what's going on. How, with this new internet that was starting to happen, like, what sorts of things could hackers do? And they wanted us to kind of lay out this doomsday scenario of like, what could seven guys in a clubhouse do? And if seven guys in a clubhouse could do it, what could other countries do? What could real adversaries do against the United States? So it was that first time where the government and probably most of the public even knew about hackers and knew about computer security and knew about how fragile the internet was and how fragile systems are as far as security. And I don't think any of us knew how kind of, I guess, momentous that day was, like that people still talk about it. That was 1998. So 26 years later, still talking about it. And some of the stuff we talked about then is still a problem, if not even more of a problem, because technology has exploded everywhere and the internet is way bigger than it was. And you do have state sponsored actors and you have governments going after other governments, and we see the propaganda, all of these things online. It's like cyber warfare is a real thing. And we basically were there to kind of predict that stuff and let the government know like this can happen. And a lot of hype came out of it where it's like, ooh, hackers say they can take down the internet in 30 minutes. Um, but of course, there's always going to be some sensationalism around it. I would like to think that people in that hearing kind of took something from it and built on it. Uh, and it is very interesting that people do still talk about it. And I think that some of those problems are going to continue to persist. And as like, some people age out and then new people come in and they make the same mistakes and more security problems. And if there's money to be involved, and then people are, so many companies are harvesting personal information and selling that to make extra money. So now that is at risk of being hacked. There's just all these things that have happened. And that was like the first real eye-opening thing for us going into the government of like, wow, this is pretty cool. But then also for them to hear from us and kind of joining. joining forces, I guess, a little bit.
Do you think that testimony was also a pivotal factor for the industry to take hacking or security seriously? Did you see any
I
effect
don't
of that?
know. I would like to think so. I don't I don't have firsthand knowledge of that. Um, I had just graduated college. Like I was 22, I think. Uh, by that point, some of the other guys were working in security related, like this was before we started the company. So they were doing kind of cybersecurity for their own companies. Uh, but I would like to think that that was a point where people are like, oh, we should probably start learning about security. We need to start thinking about security better. But as we know, things move very slowly. So even if the government thought about it or companies thought about it, like it still took a couple years for security to be something that was like an actual practical part. And it wasn't just the IT person doing some security. Like then you started having real security groups within companies doing security, internal security, but then you also had uh, some security people for kind of vulnerability handling within companies, if for software vulnerabilities and network vulnerabilities and things. So it definitely did start to ramp up after that. I just don't know how much of a direct impact that had at that time. I'm sure somebody has done some research on it, but I just went after that. I just went back to doing what I was doing, which was hacking hardware, working, my engineering job, and then eventually, starting at stake and everything. Um, but to me, that was my first public speaking experience ever. Uh, Actually, no, it's not true. I did speak at a university before then with one of the other guys in the loft, but that definitely was a very early speaking experience, and it was super fun and exciting. And we got a tour of the White House and all these cool things. Um, but then it was just like back to normal. We loved the press. It was awesome. We were on all sorts of news and we made t-shirts and like really had fun with it. Um, but then it was like, yeah, back to what we were doing and just keep moving forward with the work that we were doing. And mostly because I was young and didn't really care about, I wasn't thinking about any sort of future impact of things. Um, and I kind of still don't. Like I still don't really have a direction. I just kind of find the things that I'm interested in and then do something with it. And then eventually I'll like go do something else.
And how did you how did you think of the idea of creating JTAGulator? I know
Ah,
for the audience, JTAGulator is one of the tools that every hardware hacker uses around the world. It's one of the most famous tools used to identify debug ports on a PCB. And yeah, Joe was the one who designed and made it. So what was the idea behind this?
yeah. So that's a good question. That was a product. Um, let's see. So I released that in 2013. At that point, I had been teaching my hardware hacking classes. So teaching people about uh, identifying vulnerabilities in hardware products, uh, different techniques to like reverse engineer a board, figure out what the components do, monitor signals, kind of general hardware hacking process and mindset sort of things. And I've been teaching that course, which I continue to teach today, along with some other kind of advanced classes. Um, but I've been teaching it for about eight years at that point. And one of the things that always struck me in the class is there was one point where we were talking about like different ways of looking at a circuit board, identifying the interesting interfaces on a board. So test points, um, unpopulated connectors, looking at silkscreen markings to find something interesting. Once you find those, so say it was like on say on the Trezor, right? Like what if you just find those, but you don't know what they are? Those connections at the side,
Yep.
that's like, ooh, that's interesting, but we don't know what it is. And what I found in the class is that this was a 2 day class. So it's a kind of crash course in things. But not everybody had that time or effort to learn about once you find those pins, how do you figure out what they do? Like that's a big step. And for me, that's a natural progression of like, all right, you find the pins, you follow where they go, you do reverse engineering, you monitor signal, like all these things. But for people learning, it wasn't an obvious direction. So I was like, what if I could, build a tool that once you find some interesting interfaces, it will help you decide what things are what. Um, so kind of bridging that gap between finding the interfaces and then doing something with them. So if it does end up being JTAG or SWD or UART or whatever it is, then there's sort of more direct pathways of like what you can do with a device once you know it's there. So the JTAGulator just made that easier for people to go from finding something to doing something and reducing the amount of reverse engineering time. And I had just I designed it and I made 100 of them just to sell at DEF CON. I was like, all right, I make 100, like I'll use them in my class. It'd be cool. I make 100, sell them out of my backpack at DEF CON and just see what happens. Sold out of those like immediately, which was a cool surprise. And the challenge at that point is like, okay, now what do I do? I don't like manufacturing and selling my own stuff. To me, I feel weird selling things, even though the JTAGulator is totally open source. Almost everything I've designed is totally open source. I still feel weird selling things. I don't like that exchange of getting money from somebody from another, like I do with corporations, like with a company. If they're like, hey, we want you to come teach a class, like I'll do that. If it's an individual that's like, hey, I want to buy this thing from you, like it's just a thing I'm not comfortable with. So I didn't want to sell them myself. I ended up partnering with a company called Parallax, who really they're not a hacker company. Like they sell electronics for hobbyists and educational environments and robotics. Uh, just a really great company that they'd been selling some of my other like hobbyist electronics at that time. And I went to them and said, hey, I designed this like kind of hacker tool. It uses one of the chips that they designed, that Parallax designed. And I'm like, do you guys want to manufacture these and sell them for me? And then just like give me a royalty every time you sell one. Like I don't even care. And they did. So they started selling them. And the problem though is because it's such a technical tool, I was spending a lot of time doing support where it was really hard to like diagnose people's problems remotely. So I tried to put together enough documentation, but ultimately after 10 years of selling these things, which we were selling quite a lot. Like I don't know exact numbers, but thousands and thousands of these devices. Um, it was reaching people that maybe didn't quite know enough to be able to use it. And diagnosing those problems was really hard. And it was taking a lot of my time of like, all right, I want to focus on my own stuff. I don't want to have to like write more emails. Uh, so now I have a Discord server and it's just like we can asynchronously help people, but the tool is robust enough now that if there's a problem, it's not a hardware design problem or a firmware problem on my side. It's going to be a target issue or some, user error of some sort. Uh, so we stopped manufacturing it, but it is still open source. It might come to life again. We don't know. But it was surprisingly like one of those tools. I definitely am not going to compare it to like Metasploit, which really like opened the doors for people doing exploit, kind of development and using exploits. But it was one of these tools that because it was such a single purpose, simple thing of like attach your unknown pins to it, run some commands, and it's going to tell you what's there. Like it is one of those things, like you mentioned, like a lot of people use them as kind of this starting point. Even though it doesn't solve every problem, it just helps you. And that is really cool. Like that was really a surprise to me that that was happening, that so many people started using it. Um, and I don't feel bad about not manufacturing it anymore because it's open source. People can make their own and still use it and still contribute to the GitHub repo and everything. But I like it. Yeah, I like that it has potentially like this lasting kind of impact of people getting into hardware hacking.
And how did you decide on the name?
I was out for a run and was just trying to think of a name. So I was thinking like, so there, JTAG. And then I was thinking of like kind of really boring names of like pinout detection tool and all these things. And the JTAGulator was like, I can't exactly remember what it was a play on, but it was something I remember where I was when I thought of it. And I was like, it's kind of a cool name, but it didn't totally stick right away. I still like was thinking of other names, and I was like, whatever, I'll just use JTAGulator. There was also a tool that I had worked created years ago that was more of like a classic kind of retro video game product called the Stella adapter, which was an adapter for the Atari 2600, which the code name for the 2600 was called Stella, which would let you use regular like Atari joysticks with your PC running an emulator. So you'd have your regular Atari joystick or Sega Genesis controller, like a couple other different types of controllers, and a USB connection to your computer, and then that would show up as a regular game controller. So it was an adapter that I called the Stella adapter. So I kind of had that in my head of like JTAG, like tabulation of like keeping track of things, but I don't exactly remember, but I like it. And the logo ended up, I had a friend of mine design the logo. And I was like, I kind of sounds like a heavy metal name or something, right? Like a metal band. So he made this kind of heavy metal looking logo, and I put it on a shirt. And I don't have the shirt anymore, but I would walk around with the shirt and people would be like, nice shirt. But nobody knew what the actual tool was. It just was a cool logo. And a friend of mine even has the logo tattooed on his leg that he did about 10 years ago. Um, it definitely is a unique name. And you can use it as a verb also. So JTAGulator is the tool, but then when you JTAGulate is when you're actually using the JTAGulator to find the pins. So I like it's, kind of has turned into a term of its own.
So moving forward, tell us about your showbiz experience. I know you've done prototype this, and you're part
Yeah.
of some movies as well. Tell us more about how did they happen?
Yeah. So just another like random encounter with somebody. Um, the TV show, so prior to doing the TV show, which started in 2007, my only public interaction with people was giving talks. And I generally give a talk at Black Hat or DEF CON every year, maybe a couple other conferences around and do training classes. But I'd never done any kind of entertainment type of thing. But I think the speaking at the hacker conferences gave me enough of a base to talk about stuff, and then using all of my projects and talking about the projects is what ended up getting me on the show. So basically there was this was a Discovery Channel show um, made by the same production company as Mythbusters, and they basically were looking for like the next Mythbusters. What could we do after that show? They were thinking that the Mythbusters would sort of die out, and then they needed their next like product to sell, and which sort of didn't happen. Like we shot one season, which was a year and a half of 13 episodes, and stopped production because it was too expensive. And Mythbusters kept going and going and going into varieties of things. But the concept, as opposed to Mythbusters, which was testing myths, we were four engineers building engineering projects, like ridiculous engineering projects, big things that looked cool on TV, and big things that we didn't know if they were going to work or not. So it was really a cool way to show engineering to people uh, in a fun way, because engineering a lot of times and hacking is like pretty boring. A friend of mine used to watch me, who he's now like an English professor, and he does a lot of like really interesting stuff, but not a computer hacker person. And he used to just sit while I would like type computer programs or like go on a bulletin board system, and he would just watch me do stuff. He's like, I have no idea what you're doing. This is super boring, but he would just watch me, and he still mentions it today. It's hilarious. Um, it's really hard to take something technical and turn it into something exciting. So that was the challenge with Prototype This of like, how do we show how hard this stuff is and the realities of engineering of like when you're building a prototype, you don't know if it's going to work or not. It could fail. So we had the requirements of television, which is very structured of like, we need to film on these days, we need these many camera people, sound person, production staff. Like it was a huge thing, but engineering doesn't really fit into that very well. So we had a really fun time, like, kind of butting heads in a good way around like showing the production company how engineering works. And then they're learning from that and then crafting this show. But it was wild. So there are like DVD sets that are available, and you can find all the videos on the internet if you are creative enough. Um, and we built things like a 30-foot hydraulic computer controlled water slide simulator. So you would get into this thing, a big donut of, I guess, fiberglass filled with water, and it would project a water slide on the donut material, and you would spin around in this donut like a hamster wheel, stay in one place, but it would move, and you'd feel like you're in the water slide, which was awesome. We built 10-foot giant boxing robots that would move based on the movement of players outside the ring. So this this thing over there with the red eyes, that is the head of one of the robots that I ended up taking from the show and like mounting it as an art piece. And that was using like computer vision and accelerometers and all these different things where engineering was still not fully accessible. Like it was pre Arduino, pre Raspberry Pi. Um, but we could see it coming, right? Like we were using a lot of parallax basic stamp modules to that would abstract a lot of the low level kind of complexity of systems, so we could throw stuff together really, really fast. And that show basically they contacted me through Make Magazine, which is a kind of hobbyist, maker hobbyist magazine, which I was an advisor for them when they first started. And this production company had already found a machinist, a software engineer, and a materials science person. And they're like, well, who else do we need to kind of build this group? And one of the guys who ended up being Zaz, who is now a longtime friend of mine and also fellow DEF CON participant, was like, we need a hardware guy. We need like somebody who can build electronics. And through Make Magazine, they found me, and I did a little interview with some electronics that I'd worked on and told some stories. Um, and ended up like, the four of us building these ridiculous things. Um, so much fun, probably more so for us than like the production team who had to deal with like a bunch of type A personalities, all, very controlling of what they do. And but we all got along really well. Like it was such a fun show. So highly recommended if you haven't seen it, like go out and try to find some. I actually just got an email right before this podcast from somebody who said my daughter loved watching your show when she was like between the ages of 8 and 10, and now she's in college for mechanical engineering. And that's like pretty wild to think about because I don't really feel that much different than I did back then. But it's like we were showing things that people actually liked and learned from and wanted to do the same thing, which is really what I try to do with hacking most of the time now, is like let people know like you can hack stuff, you can do it, right? Like if you put in the time and the effort and you focus, it might be hard, it might be easy, you can do it. To just demystify some of that. So that was actually really cool. That was a super fun experience. And then from doing the show, kind of fine-tuned my speaking capability, and then it just sort of molded together of like when I'm on stage, I feel like I'm on TV, and when I'm on TV, I feel like I'm on stage. So from that, and I love being in front of the camera. Like to me, it's it's easier to be in front of a camera or to be on stage with thousands of people in the audience than it is to be in a one-to-one conversation. So it just was a natural fit for me. And then from that, like that show ended, and I dabbled in a couple other potential projects, pilot episodes, and things. But just went back to hacking, went back to engineering, and then started doing, my some of my YouTube video stuff. And then through the YouTube videos, somebody contacted me and said, "Hey, we're working on a kind of cryptocurrency thriller. Do you want to be involved in it?" And I was like, "This is so cool! Like, yeah, I'm gonna be in a movie. Like, that's really awesome." Which is funny because when Prototype This happened, um, I was like, I don't know if I want to be on a show. Like, I was talking to my wife. I'm like, I don't know if I want. This is like a real job. I don't know if I can do another real job. Um, she's like, you have to do it. Like, this can be your own TV show. Like, come on, do it. So she had to really kind of push me to do TV in the first place. But when this movie email happened, the guys who sent the email were like, Joe's never going to respond. And I saw it and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. And I responded, and they basically an independent company with some investors that were making this cryptocurrency film, and they wrote a part specifically for me to basically play not play myself directly, but play a person with shades of myself. And I actually do it from this same environment. But I have a little piece in this movie that is a really cool kind of cryptocurrency thriller revenge film. Um, that is definitely like you're not going to grow any brain cells by watching it, but you're not going to lose any either. Like it's a very entertaining movie with some really talented people. And like actual real celebrities are in the movie, and it was fun to sort of the bits that I got to see of them filming was really cool. And it's just a fun story, a sort of nail biter. And you know, it's like who do you root for? And if you have a movie where you're not sure like who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, like it's pretty cool. So that is actually coming out in early 2025. I just found out. Um, I don't know where. I don't know if it's on streaming or if it's movie theaters or whatever it is. It did screen at South by Southwest last year. So we actually, all of us in the cast got to go down, and like I dressed up in fancy stuff and did the whole red carpet thing and got to see the movie. And it was super fun. And people there were surprised. They're like, "Oh, is this, you know, what else have you been in?" And I'm like, "I'm not an actor. Like I'm a hacker that just happened to be in the movie." Um, but like a super fun experience. And it's those sorts of things that besides the intellectual challenge side, like it's these weird moments of like getting to do a TV show or filming a video that goes viral that I can share some really cool thing with. Or this movie of like like I'm actually gonna be in a real movie. It's just like random weird things. And I like that. And I like those little opportunities where I never know what's gonna happen, and nothing, you know, there might never be anything that happens again, but it's always like just trying to like doing putting myself out there enough of like doing what I like to do where maybe the stars align for certain things to happen. And it is really fun. Like the movie stuff, given my TV experience, made it doable because I knew exactly what to expect. I knew how the movie's made. You know, I know how the sausage is made. So I knew like how to do my takes. I still mess up a lot, and the editors have to do a lot of editing with all of my stuff. But it's all about like telling a story and really exposing people to a world that they might not know. And I think that's been the hardest thing, whether it's been engineering or hacking or cryptocurrency. My world still is this hacker world, but I know now that there is a much larger world out there of people of all walks of life from all around the world that have no idea about these things that can learn something from something I do. And that is probably the most motivating, interesting thing. At least that keeps me going of like, okay, if I do this, I want to now share it with other people. Uh, because who knows, like this person who's now in mechanical engineering school, like what's she going to go off and do as a professional? Like maybe she's going to go change the world with something. So it's like planting these seeds in people and having fun doing it is surprising, and I was never expecting it, and it's super awesome.
What's the name of the movie? Is it
So
Cold Wallets?
the movie is called Cold Wallet.
Cold Wallets, right?
Yep. And yeah, coming coming to theaters in 2025 or whatever, coming somewhere in 2025. And it's the type of movie that I hope gets pirated, and like spreads to everybody because, maybe the production company doesn't want that to happen, but it is one of those movies that deserves to be seen by everybody and deserves to be pirated because it is cryptocurrency related, like hacker related. It has that sort of underbelly of like, I mean, obviously you should go see it in the theater if you can. You should stream it if you can, but like if you have to get a copy to see it, I'm all for it. So I don't condone piracy, but you should watch Prototype This and you should watch Cold Wallet.
All right. All right. So we learned about hardware wallets. There are more problems in software than hardware, but hardware wallets are not impenetrable,
Yep.
or it's just a matter of time when
Yep.
somebody comes up finds issues with the secure elements that are used in the wallets. Uh, if you are getting into hardware hacking, check out Joe Grant's YouTube, check out JTAGulator, follow him on on YouTube.
All the social media. There
Yes.
is, so I will say, um, probably the easiest way to find my actual legitimate sites and social media is if you just go to joegrand.com. That currently redirects to a Linktree page that has all my links. That's eventually going to be my own custom site. But that is going to link to my Grand Idea Studio website, which has all my engineering and security stuff. It's going to link to um, the wallet hacking stuff. So that is the best way because there are, it turns out, like actual Joe Grand impersonators because of the cryptocurrency work. People set up fake accounts all the time. I would never like reach out to somebody directly and say, "Hey, I'm Joe. Like, do you want to join my investment platform?" But there are impersonators that do that, and people think it's me and fall for it. So yeah, joegrand.com to find the actual correct Joe Grand. And I do have that Discord server also that is fairly low traffic, but it's like a cool spot if you have engineering questions or you want to meet other hackers and engineers and stuff, more hardware hacking focused, cryptocurrency focused. But yeah, that would be the way, joegrand.com.
Right. So thank you so much, Joe, for being on the show. And thank you so much for also being on our advisory board as well.
Yes, of course. I mean, that's like the next step of like in order to get people who aren't in this world to understand security and understand hardware hacking and understand vulnerabilities, like that is the next thing. So I think what you guys are doing is awesome. Um, yeah, I appreciate being on this and appreciate everybody who's going to watch it. Uh, and yeah, let's see what happens in the future.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, guys, this is me signing off from the Jhacker Show. Until next time. Thank you.